Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. Hello, and welcome back to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. It's the end of August, and summer vacation for students across the United States is coming to an end. Even though I'm no longer a student, I'm married to a high school teacher, so I'm keenly aware of the school year schedule. I'm sure many of you parents have school-aged children, so you're also keeping track of the school year schedule. Because of my husband being on the school year schedule, we generally take a big vacation over the summer, often but not necessarily coinciding with my August birthday. Growing up, I rarely had birthday parties because most of my friends would be on summer vacation in August after the city offered summer camps that were generally in July. While I generally do a lot of travel for work as well as to attend conferences, it feels like I did even more travel this summer. For our big summer vacation, my husband and I went to Croatia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Slovenia back in June as soon as the school year ended. We then visited my sister in Chicagoland for the July 4th holiday. In mid-July, I traveled to Las Vegas to attend a conference hosted by Simone Seol and Melissa Tiers. Then later in July, I spent a long weekend in Colorado to hike the Black Canyon of Gunnarson National Park. The motivation for that trip was my pursuit of going to all the national parks within the contiguous United States. Now I have one last national park in order to meet that goal. In the first week of August, I went camping for 3 days in Pennsylvania at an event called Pensick. I'll also be attending the Women in Ophthalmology Conference in Carlsbad, California later this August. I tell you all this because with all this travel, I have to admit that when I'm at home, I just don't feel like working. I did work my physician job 1 week in June, 3 weeks in July, and I'm scheduled to work 2 weeks in August. I look at my husband with his long stretch of summer vacation and think about what not having to work would look like, aka retirement. I think many people imagine that retirement could look like an endless vacation. At the MIT Age Lab, people are asked to describe their future in retirement and what they will be doing in life outside of work. The top responses are, number 1, travel the world, which of course is what I think of as well, but I'm not waiting to retirement in order to do it. Number 2, quality time with family. Number 3, lots to do, like fixing that leaky faucet. Number 4, dust off old hobbies. Number 5, save the world, or at least volunteer. And certainly, this is how many retirees spend the first 5 or even 10 years of their retirement. But eventually, the traveling slows down. You've caught up on all the things that you've put off over time, and maybe you're just not able to physically do all the things that you previously did before. According to data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Consumer Expenditure Survey, household expenditures decline as people age. Ty Bernicki, a certified financial planner, published a paper called Reality Retirement Planning, a New Paradigm for an Old Science in 2005. In this paper, he looked at the 2002 Consumer Expenditure Survey and saw there was a reduction in the total average annual expenditure for older age groups, specifically for the age categories of 45 to 54, 55 to 64, 65 to 74, and 75 and older. The categories for spending were apparel and services, entertainment, food and alcohol, healthcare, housing, transportation, miscellaneous, personal insurance, and pensions. The reductions in total expenditure could be attributed to decreased spending in every major category with the exception of healthcare expenditure. There was an overall 27% reduction in spending between the 55 to 64 age group compared to the 65 to 74 age group, and another 26% reduction in spending comparing the 65 to 74 age group with the 75 and older age group. The paper does point out a limitation in these statistics in that a person in a nursing home is unlikely to participate in a survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This could dramatically decrease the actual cost of healthcare if you want to include the cost of a nursing home in the cost of healthcare. and that certainly would add to total annual expenditures. One obvious question to ask is whether or not this decreased spending was voluntary or out of necessity. And it does seem like it is voluntary. There was another study conducted by Ticino and Saltzman that indicates that those over 75 years of age spend less than those aged 65 to 74, despite maintaining similar levels of income. Traditional retirement planning generally assumes that household spending remains constant, with increases due to inflation over time. However, it's possible that this is really an overestimate in spending during retirement. What Bernicki calls reality retirement planning is assuming that households' real spending needs decrease incrementally throughout retirement until it stabilizes. He then argues that the average American may actually need less for retirement using the reality retirement planning compared to traditional retirement planning. In his paper, he runs a scenario of a husband and wife, both aged 55, who are planning to retire with a life expectancy of 30 years. Their annual expenses are $60,000, and they both expect to receive $12,000 a year at age 62 from Social Security. They have $800,000 in their 401k. With the traditional approach, a Monte Carlo analysis gives an 87% failure rate of their money lasting for that 30-year life expectancy. That means that there's only a 13% chance that their portfolio would actually give them enough money to fund another 30 years of living. Using the reality retirement planning approach, which decreases a couple's spending needs as they age, but still accounting for inflation, the Monte Carlo analysis actually indicated a 0% failure rate, which means that with the less spending over time as they age, that they would not run out of money over their 30-year life expectancy. I found this interesting since I've been looking at my current expenditures through my 30s and 40s as a benchmark of my spending during retirement. In this process, I've actually made a spending plan for retirement because there are some expenses that decrease during retirement. Once you're retired and you're financially independent, you no longer need to be paying for disability insurance or life insurance because you're basically self-insuring. You don't actually need money from your job. And so if you can't work, that's fine because you're not working anymore. If you have enough money to provide for the rest of your life, then presumably you have whatever money you need for your dependents, which is the reason to have term life insurance. There's also no longer having to pay any expenses related to working. Transportation costs are generally less because you're not commuting anymore. Clothing costs may be less due to not having to buy work clothes anymore. One expense I calculate going up is those healthcare expenses because of no longer having employer-subsidized health insurance. Of course, I've made all these plans with the idea to retire early. I've also heard from multiple sources that spending often rises for the first 5 years after retirement due to increased travel and spending on hobbies. After all, the time you spend working was time that you weren't spending on doing activities. If now, instead of working, you're spending money on doing those activities, then you can imagine that you would end up spending more, just like you typically will spend more when you're traveling on activities than when you're at home working. When I travel, I'm spending to do activities like going to museums or visiting attractions or doing activities like kayaking. Those aren't things that I'm spending money on when I'm actually going to work. The bottom line is that there are a lot of variables when it comes to knowing how much is enough in terms of knowing when you're truly financially independent and when you can retire. And this pertains even with retiring early. In an upcoming podcast episode, I'll review some online calculators that actually helps in figuring out that number for you. But for any retirement calculator to be useful, you'll really want to think about how much spending you want to plan for when you stop working. Looking at my parents now, I can see some truth in that reality retirement approach. My father has a similar passion to travel like I do. He's now in his late 70s, and in the past few years, his desire to travel seems to have significantly decreased. My parents spend a lot more time at home and likely spend less money by being at home more. I do think it's really important to visualize what you think you want to do in retirement and, one, ask why you aren't doing more of it now. 2, think about really what the cost of doing it would be. And 3, how long would you want to be doing those things for? Of course, we often think about retirement the first few years of retirement, but how do you see life even further along than that? How do you see yourself living in your 70s and 80s or even your 90s? Depending on your specialty, some of these people may be your patients. How do you see them living? How do you see your parents or your spouse's parents living? I know there are many physicians who would like to be able to retire from medicine earlier, and it's possible that you don't actually need as much as you think you may need. If you would like some personal help with your financial planning, including organizing your thoughts about what you really want during your retirement, then please feel free to reach out to me. You can set up a Zoom meeting at my website, www.growyourwealthymindset.com, where we can discuss your financial goals and anything that's stopping you from reaching them. If you haven't already, subscribe to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast so you never miss an episode. Episodes are released every Wednesday. Thank you so much for being a listener of the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, and I'll be back next week with another episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.